So I just felt compelled to share what I'm going to share today, and I'm hoping that it resonates for you. And it's not, there's things that happen to me, but I'm hoping it resonates for you. I think it's important at this time on the planet to really listen to our guidance, our inner guidance, our intuition, because as you all know, there's a lot of earth changes happening. There's a lot of climate change. And for some people who might be in a place that's vulnerable to flooding or wildfires, for instance, if you get guidance to move somewhere, you might want to listen, right? But it's not only about catastrophes. It could be, there's this spiritual community. No, I don't want to say that. Here's spiritual. It could be that there's a soulmate or a perfect job or an opportunity to serve. And it might be somewhere where we're not. So we just need to listen. That's kind of, I think, the impetus for why I want to share this. But you can tell me how it resonates afterwards. So there's only two stories I think I'm going to have time for. My traveling began back in Oakland is probably when it began, but in 2018, I had this job that was actually a pretty good job and stable with decent income. And I kept on getting this intuition I was supposed to travel. And it was so strong, it just wouldn't go away. And I thought, I don't need a vacation. What's this about? And I thought, I think it's a spiritual journey. I think there's a reason for it. It's a soul journey. And so that was the first kind of soul journey I went on. And it was in Northern California because I wanted to experience the redwoods and the Pacific Ocean. And then I wanted to end up in Montana, where a dear spiritual sister lives. So this first story happened in Montana. So I'd been on the road camping for maybe about 3 weeks or 4 or 5 before I got to Polson, which is a little town city in northwestern Montana. And it was such a blessing to see my friend and to be in a nice warm bed because, I don't know if you've ever been on the coast, but it gets really damp and foggy and chilly. And this was in the fall, and I was on Mount Shasta for a few nights, and it was down in the 30s. So it was a blessing to be in a warm house with a friend I could talk to after so much solitude, and a kitchen at my disposal where I could make good food. I didn't have to pay a lot of money for it. So it was really a blessing. And we did go on several, beautiful day trips to Glacier Park and Garden of 1,000 Buddhas. But after about the 5th day, I was chomping at the bit to be in nature again and to be alone again. And nothing against Amara, but I don't know about you all. Someone else said this recently. When I'm in someone else's home with someone else's presence, a little bit harder for me to enter into my spiritual practices. I just can't go as deep. I'm not as present because I'm distracted by this other person, maybe. So I was missing the depth of connection I felt when I was in nature in solitude. So this was growing in me, and specifically, I was feeling really guided to camp in the mountains there. When I was coming in from Idaho, the road was southeast, west to east, and it dead ended in a highway that was north to south. And parallel to that highway was this chain of mountains. It was the upper end of the Rocky Mountains that head right into Canada. And I was so struck by those mountains. They were called the Mission Mountains. And I found them so beautiful. And I kept on thinking, I want to camp on the mountains. I want to camp on the mountains. So I finally mentioned this to Amara, and we both come to the same conclusion that it's getting pretty cold. And I had this cheap little Walmart tent, and maybe I should camp in my car. And this is the first time in my life I've ever camped in a car. So she graciously gave me her some space in her closet so I could unload some of the many, many things from my car so I could have room to spread out in the back. And I ventured forth to do that. There's some details I'm not sure whether to include because it makes the story longer. I really felt like I wanted to ask permission of the native elders to camp there because I was on a native reservation. It was the Flathead Indian Reservation. And there are Flathead Indians, but there were many tribes that were all on that one reservation. And I wanted to ask, and as I was coming south, I saw a sign that said something about Native American Museum. And I've been on this highway many times and I never noticed it before. Long story short, you have to pay a fee to camp on the mountains. So that was my permission, I guess, paying that fee. At the gas station, a guy suggested I go on St. Mary's Drive. And I thought, I love Mary. That sounds like a good plan, right? So I'm driving up this drive up the mountain. And what most Americans don't know is many, many, many of the Indian reservations have 50% or more white people on them. There are many, many non-native people on reservation land. And it has to do with this act passed by Congress quite a long time ago called the Dawes Act, where they subdivide this huge piece of communal land into allotments for individuals. And so over time, they get sold and then their reservation disappears, right? It's very sad. So I was driving up this road and from afar, it looks like it's forested, but there were all these residences. And I could be wrong, but my assumption is that they were mostly middle to upper class white people living in this beautiful mountain land. And I couldn't find anywhere to camp. It was all these homes, all these homes. I was looking for like a little pullout or a dirt drive or something, and there was nothing, nothing, nothing. And it's getting to be late afternoon, and I want to get settled before dark. So I finally settled for something that was not ideal, but sufficient. There was a grassy field to my right. Maybe an acre, I'm guessing. And I would have liked to have parked back next to the trees, but I was afraid I might get stuck. And I also didn't know if it was private land and I get in trouble. So I pulled parallel to the road and I parked there. So I didn't have shelter, I didn't have privacy, but I was on my mountain. Now here's where it gets interesting. I get out of the car and I walk onto the grassy field and I instantly feel relief to be there. I instantly feel gratitude to be in nature again. It is palpable how blessed I feel to be in nature again. And I offer some prayers. I take a walk down the road and then I come back and I get my car, I get my bed ready and I set up a little altar on the dashboard, offer more prayers and try to go to sleep. And I toss and turn, toss and turn, toss and turn. I could not get comfortable. And finally I said, Cindy, be still. And I think that's really applies to many areas of my life, you know, stop what you're doing, just be still, breathe. And I was able to finally fall asleep. In the middle of the night, I hear footsteps outside my car. And I was so freaked out. I was so freaked out because not only did no one know where I was, you know, the mountains are enormous, but I had heard and seen pickup trucks driving up and down this road. And when I was walking, I saw beer cans along the road and I thought, drunken hunters, that's what I thought. I'm like, that's the last thing I want to encounter. If you're a woman, you all know what I mean. Like, I'm not afraid of wild animals, but like a guy in the middle of a dark night or a bunch of guys, that's terrifying. So I was in that place of fear where I was afraid to breathe because if I breathe, they might hear me, which of course is not logical. You're not going to hear a breath on the other side of the, you know, locked doors and the windows up, but I was just petrified. And, you know, can you imagine how tense I was? And then a moment of grace, this thought came to my head. I wonder if it's a spirit. Now, some of you might think I'm crazy, and some of you will understand, but for at least 3 times prior to that, I had heard footsteps that I realized were spirits. One time was on a vision quest, and that was confirmed by my teacher. 2 steps in the middle of the night, just 2 steps. Another time was before a sweat lodge, and another time was when I was camping after my dad died. So, a few months ago, right here, I said that I didn't think I was clairaudient, but what I'm realizing is that is something I need to acknowledge. I can hear spirits. Sometimes I hear knocking when no one's there. That's happened many, many times. I just don't always get the telepathic messages. But anyway, when I had that thought, I wonder if it's a spirit, I knew it was true instantly. And I thought, I bet you it's a guardian spirit of the mountain. I bet you, I had this image of a Native American grandfather. I said, I bet you it's a guardian spirit. And with that, I just relaxed. And then this is so hard to explain, but I entered some kind of liminal space. I was definitely not asleep, and I was awake, but it kind of wasn't maybe 3D reality anymore. It kind of got like a little fuzzy, foggy, weird. I don't know how to explain it. It was just in kind of altered space. And I sensed that there was someone or something in the car with me. I felt the presence of something. And there was an inquisitive presence. I felt like there was a question being asked, but I couldn't discern the question. But I knew that I needed to give an answer, yes or no. So it's a little bit hard to know what to say when you don't know what the question is, right?
50% chance you're right.
They said 50% chance you're right. So I just checked in with myself and I thought, okay, I feel safe enough. So I kind of gave this tentative yes, right? Then it's not something I felt on the physical plane, but I had this knowing that at that moment, there was this very, very sweet, very brief, intimate encounter with a spirit. And the sweetness was very palpable. It was very sweet. And at that point, I did fall into a dream. And in that dream, I was in a circle of Native Americans. We were inside a building. And there was a young man with, dark black hair, straight hair, and a round face. And he had a platter of food. We were sharing food together. And there were many things. I think there was macaroni and cheese, and there was turtle meat, which is significant. I'm not going to go into all the details, but that was a clue for me later on. But anyway, he was offering this food. And at one point I picked up, I thought I should try turtle meat. I picked up the shell of the turtle and it turned into a real turtle. And I'm like, I fall back asleep then. And in the morning I woke up and I woke up and it took me a moment to find my bearings. And I'm like, wow, that was a powerful night. Sometimes I do things and I have the hope that something profound will happen and like nothing really happens. But there were 3 things that happened that have never happened to me before or since. So when I woke up, I thought, I want to go share this with this woman who I had met a few weeks ago, who was this wise woman. She was a grandmother, kind of Celtic, very gifted spiritually. And I thought I want to share this with her to see if she has any insight. And as I was sharing it, she kind of was looking off to the side like she could see it holographically. And she said, yes, it was a spirit. And I mean, yes, there was a guardian and you are absolutely protected. Mm-hmm. And yes, that young man was your lover in another life. And then the other thing, which is so sweet, is she said, you were a part of a tribe on this mountain, and they were so glad that you returned. Oh. They were so happy to see you again. So that's one story, right? Of what happens when we listen to our guidance. Go to the mountain, camp in the mountain. Okay. So for me, it was, I guess, this reconnection with a life that I had forgotten about, of course, at a conscious level. So anyway, that was very, very, very special. One of probably the most special moments of my life, I think. The next story, I hope I have time to squeeze. Okay, thank you. The next story is a different kind. It's not an intuition that builds over time. It was more of a gut feeling. So remember to turn so you don't see my back all the time. So about 3 weeks before, I was driving along the Klamath River, which is this beautiful wild river in Northern California. And at one point on the western side of the river, it kind of the road turned southward. And at that point, I saw a sign on the side of the road that said, Eureka, 30 miles. And I had planned to go there because I had done research and found that there had been a massacre there, one of many sad ones that happened in the West. There were so many. And I had planned to go there. But when I saw that sign, nothing in me wanted to go. Nothing. Because it was a town, it was a city, and I wanted to be in nature. There's that theme again. I didn't want to be in a town at that point. I was desperate to be in nature. So almost without thinking, my car turned to the right, and I went off that main road, and I was on this tiny, tiny little road that was very narrow, very curvy, going up at a steep ascent. And I thought, this would not be a good place to break down. And it was so remote. It was so remote. And I had to talk myself out of my discomfort. I had to say, Cindy, you wanted to be in nature. Here you are. You wanted to be on this pilgrimage. Here you are. Just accept this is where you are right now. So I think I was driving for an hour and a half through really remote territory. There was forest and there were maybe a few wildflowers. And I don't remember seeing a single house or a single side street. I think 3 cars maybe passed me. It was really, really a back road. And in that environment, all of a sudden on the right, I see this ornate gate, and I see this kind of fancy building that could be either like a museum or maybe a visitor center or something like that, brick, big, whatever. And it was like so weird to see that in the middle of this forest, but there was a sign and it said, Yurok Veterans Cemetery. I didn't know the Yurok at that point. It's apparently one of the larger native tribes of California. But I saw that it was a cemetery and I thought, I'm here on a pilgrimage, I should pray. Yeah, that's what you do. So I turned off and the gate was locked, but there were these boulders on the right. And so I just took my little travel rattle and I went and I sat on a stone and I started to shake my rattle and pray. And, I prayed for the veterans. I prayed for the people who loved them. I prayed for their sacrifice. I prayed for their descendants and their ancestors. And I don't remember all that I said, but what was notable was the whole time I was praying, there were tears sliding down my cheeks. I wasn't sobbing, but there were these silent tears the whole time. It was so unexpected. After maybe 10 minutes, I stopped and I opened my eyes, and there in front of me on the grass was this butterfly about this big. And it was kind of going in a circle on the grass, facing this way, and this way, almost like it was praying to the directions. And then that butterfly was joined by a couple other ones, and they were fluttering around. And I'm sure you all know that butterflies can symbolize a psyche or the soul or a spirit of someone who has gone on. And so my assumption is the spirits were thanking me for my prayers, maybe, or acknowledging that I was there. The synchronicities continue, though. So after this, I get back in my car and I am not consulting GPS or a map. I'm just kind of following. There was another choice point, and I end up at the Pacific coast, which is where I wanted to go. I ended up there by accident almost. And I went to get something to eat and go to the bathroom, which was really critical at that point. And I asked the waitress, I said, you know, I really want to get to the ocean before it gets dark, but I didn't really see any turnoff points. And so she gave me 3 or 4 choices of how to get to the ocean. And I found myself rejecting that choice and then going to this third option. And when I pull in the parking lot, what do I see but a sign that says Ancient Yurok Village? Okay, so here's third synchronicity. About a week later, I was camping and I was taking a drive, and I was going up where I could see over the ocean. And then as I was coming down, again, it was by accident, I end up where the Klamath River meets the ocean, which is, I was taught is very sacred. When the fresh water meets the salt water, it's a very sacred place. And there were some native people in boats fishing there. I'm guessing they were Yurok fishing for salmon because it's part of their traditional diet. So I spent some time there. And also I knew another reason I thought they were Yurok is because I had gone to a state park that had some buildings, recreated buildings, and they were there. These were like real buildings, not recreated, that were made from redwood trees, fallen redwood trees. So I go out to lunch and I see a Yurok visitor center. And my story is almost done in case you're getting bored. So it's a beautiful center, really beautifully done. And there is a young woman there who is a native woman. And she's very friendly. And I tell her, do you mind if I tell you what happened to me earlier today? And I tell her about finding the Yurok cemetery. And she said, that's what that whole area of forest. And she rattled off the name of all these villages where her people lived, all in a different language, a native language. And you just can't make this stuff up, you know? It was so beautiful. So again, possibly a former life, right? I'm guessing possibly, right? So that's a story of listening to your gut. Don't second guess yourself. Don't say you planned this, go listen to your plans. No, be flexible. Go where you're guided to go. Go where you're guided to go.
Thank you.